Greetings, everyone from CDSS, and welcome to our 5th CDSS web chat. Our topic this evening is building safe dance communities, and we have a wonderful assortment of guests this evening that you'll be hearing from, and we're very excited that you are all joining us. We know that there were 92 people who RSVP'd to this web chat, and they're from 26 states and 4 provinces. So we're thrilled that you're joining in. So I actually want to start by thanking you, each one, for being part of this web chat. We know that your work as dance organizers is what keeps the whole music and dance world alive. So we very much value everything you're doing. My name is Linda Henry. I'm the CDSS Community Resources Manager. And with me here at the office this evening are Lynn Nichols and Nikki Perez. And I want to remind everybody once again to mute your microphone and turn off your webcam. So to get things started, we want to thank our generous donors and CDSS members and group affiliates for your support to make things like this web chat possible. And if any of you listening in would like to join as members, you can find information on the website to become an individual member and or a group affiliate. We are very aware that the work you're all doing is, like I said, keeping the music and dance world alive. And so we're very actively creating and providing resources to support the work that you're doing. And the web chat is turning out to be a wonderful way to offer resources to people across the continent. And so the way this has been working, based on the information we've received from previous web chat participants, we choose topics that we know will be pertinent, and we scout around the continent for groups that are having success in that area. And then we line up speakers from different communities who can share their successes on any given topic. We've chosen tonight's topic of building safe dance communities based on lots of feedback we've heard from organizers across the continent. Organizers are dealing with lots of issues on the dance floor as well as through social media, etc. So the group of speakers that we have tonight will be sharing lots of resources. Some of them have been in the works for many years. Some are just now being generated. So we hope that you will gather some useful tips and tools from throughout this next hour. For those of you who are not viewing screens, I will let you know that we are now seeing a screen that describes the web chat format. You'll be hearing from people in 4 different communities, and while you're listening to them, if you have questions, you can enter them in the chat bar, and then we'll have a Q&A period after the last guest. And Lynn will be moderating that. We'll hear a question and then have a pause so the guests can gather their thoughts, and any of them will chime in on topics that they have comments on. And then we'll wrap it up with me sharing more resources that are available through CDSS for dance organizers. So we're going to start it off with Avia Moore from Toronto, Ontario. She's a CDSS board member, and she'll be speaking on behalf of the CDSS Community Safety Task Group. Take it away, Avia.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm actually calling in from New York, so I live in Toronto, but I'm in New York tonight, and I have a guest behind me. So this is Ollie. I'm here representing the board and the Community Safety Task Group, and Diane is actually also on that task group. She's tonight representing another group. So And this task group has had a number of permutations over the years, but the things that I'm going to be talking about tonight are the work of sort of the last year, the version of it that has evolved over the last year. So as a group, our aim is to support local communities in their efforts to provide a safe environment for music, song, and dance events. And we want to work to provide advice and resources that will help organizers develop their own policies, procedures, and documents. I want to emphasize before I get into this that it's not our goal to be prescriptive about what your community should be doing. In fact, it's the opposite. We hope to offer tools that will be really broadly helpful to all of our affiliates and beyond, but we also recognize that different communities may require and choose different approaches to these materials. So it's important for us to offer sort of a palette or a toolbox of resources for you. I think, Lynn, if you could go to the next slide. I'm now not remembering the order of these in, of course. Okay, so building a safe and welcoming event space includes providing for everyone's physical, mental, emotional well-being. To state just the first sort of priorities. And because this includes addressing a range of problems, we see that a range of tools are needed to help organizers develop procedures and to create safe spaces. So as such, we're working to develop a toolkit of resources. And these include a structure. So what building blocks do organizers need to facilitate a safe environment? A clearinghouse, existing examples of building blocks. And many of those examples will be discussed by the other folks on the web chat tonight specifically. And then finally, a writing guide. So synthesized ideas and options that will help you get started and make pulling your resources much together easier. And that you can use this toolkit to adapt to your own local needs rather than using it in a prescriptive way. All right, the two things that I am going to discuss tonight are structure and writing guide in particular. So we think that the community should consider having the following set of documents. Next slide. Okay, so first, a statement of community values. And this is where you sort of describe the environment that you want to create. This is the vision for your dance. It may be, it's in addition to your mission and vision, but it's really the values of your organization. And these will be really specific to every dance or every event. I know we're not just talking about dances here. And these values are the justification for the policies and any actions that you take. So that if something comes up in your community, you can look at it and say, well, this doesn't align with our values, and this is why we need to act to bring it in line with our values. Next slide. So the second thing is a code of conduct. And this is a document that codifies all of the behavioral expectations of your event. And it really outlines what behavior will not be tolerated. And very importantly, it also outlines what the consequences will be. Because if you have a document that only says what will not be tolerated, and you don't set out in advance what the consequences will be, then if there is an infraction, you're going to have to scramble to figure that out. And I know that's something we've heard from organizers that can be a major stress on any group. So this is a policy document, but it's not part of your nonprofit bylaws. And it, again, is based on the community values that you've developed. Next. Third, this is your courtesy and etiquette literature. So this is really proactive literature. This is about creating the environment that you want to see at your dance, and setting out in advance the do's rather than the don'ts. You know, how do you want people to behave when they come in the door? This might include things like, always ask before twirling someone. Or, you know, at our dance, it's okay to say no when you're asked to dance. Anybody can ask anybody to dance. Anybody can dance in either position. And again, these will be specific to dances. I know some dances have rules, and it varies from parts of the country and what you've set out. You know, do be kind to each other on the dance floor. This is what you want to see. How do we want to give feedback to each other? Next slide. And finally, this is mostly an internal document rather than an outward-facing document, but how is your group going to handle complaints? So this isn't the consequences that are outlined in an outward-facing way so that people know what will happen if they go against behavioral expectations, but rather this is how your dance will maintain the safety on the dance floor. And I know that everybody else is going to be touching on this in various ways, but who handles complaints? How are they handled? What is the timing of that response? All of these things are in the complaint procedures. So these are the 4, next slide. As a whole, these are the 4 elements that we see create sort of the structure that that groups should think towards as they create their safe communities. We'll just leave it here for a moment, but in terms of the slide. But the other thing I want to touch on is the writing guide. So one of the things we hear from communities on a regular basis, both sort of formally and also informally, is people saying, well, we know we need a courtesy etiquette guide. We know we need a code of conduct, but it is such a big task to create this. So we feel a little bit daunted by heading into this. And we know that there are resources out there. We've seen other groups create them. We know they're available online. And yet it's also daunting to sort of wade through all of that material and figure out what we need for our dance. And so the safety task group is trying to create a writing guide that will ease that process. So we are creating a, I'm sorry, go down here. So we're creating something that for each element of each piece of this structure will provide 2 to 4 examples that represent a range of ideas and approaches. And so we have pulled things from we've done the sort of looking through all of those other guides that have been created, and we've adapted language ourselves. And this is a huge job. We've the example we have tonight, and that I think Linda will be sending out afterwards or posting on the website, is just the very beginning. So we recognize that it's a huge task, but we want to make it easier for you. So I think of it as sort of a choose your own adventure to writing policy. And for example, we started with the courtesy and the etiquette element, the elements that will help you shape your local dance culture. So the first sentence or 2 of the row that asks people, the row that deals with how we ask people to dance, might sound like this. And each of these examples is actually longer. I'm just reading the first couple lines of it. So version 1 that we offer might be, anyone may ask anyone to dance. You may refuse an invitation to dance for any reason. Version 2 might be, you are always free to say no when someone asks you to dance. You don't have to give a reason. You can just say, no, thank you. If you ask someone to dance and they say no, take it gracefully and move on. And version 3 might be, ask a partner kindly, accept their answer cheerfully. So that any group who's working on writing etiquette can say, oh, here's 3 beautiful examples of language, and this one works best for our dance. And so on. And we are trying to go through each of those elements of the structure and give you writing guide examples. So we really hope that this will allow organizers to pull out the language that works for them, which of course then they can adapt. And we're open for feedback and questions about this task, either in the questions at the end of tonight, or in the feedback form that Linda sends out afterwards. But this is what we wanted tonight to give you a sense of what the Safety Task Group is working on to help our affiliates tackle this huge task. So that's my little spiel, and I turn it back to Linda.
Great, Avia. We can tell that the task force has been very busy and there's a lot more work to do. So we'll look forward to learning more about how to access this information. This is something we can be communicating to the web chat participants as you go along.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much. Next, we have Diane Silver and Robert Zieber from the Asheville, North Carolina area. They're longtime organizers for the Old Farmers Ball Dance and have lots of wonderful information that they've put together, and we'll be seeing only the tip of the iceberg. So Diane and Robert, take it away.
All right, thank you. We agreed I'm going to do most of the talking just for consistency, and Robert's going to nudge me when I forget something and chime in. So here in Asheville, we've been around for a long time, about 30 years, our organization, our dance organization. And for the most part, we've had sort of a default process for when people lodge a complaint, which is we handle things on a case-by-case basis. And we didn't have any specific policies for how complaints were handled. And we had kind of two things happen that led us to finally decide that we needed a more specific policy. One was in the wake of the Me Too movement, we found people more and more feeling empowered to speak up and tell us when things were not as they should be. And we encouraged that, and we were pleased to hear it. The other piece is that we found that sometimes people were leaving our dance and we didn't know why. And we specifically wanted to start encouraging more reporting, that if anything makes you uncomfortable in any way, we want to hear about it. Please tell us, because we want to know what's wrong and make it better. And so with those two things, we started getting more complaints. And so then we found ourselves in the position of, well, we asked for it, so now what do we do about it? And so we realized we needed to have a clear complaint policy and set of procedures. And it was about a 6 to 8 month time frame of many committee meetings to create our document, and we're proud of it. It's a work in progress. One of the tenets of it is that it's a living document and it can be amended as we go. So as we use it and gain experience, we might be tweaking it to make it work better. It is on our website, which will be shown at the end of the slides. And we give anybody out there permission to use it. You're welcome to plagiarize blatantly. We just ask that you cite the Old Farmers Ball as a resource if you lift language from our document and use it for your own. We hope that it will be helpful to other communities. So with that, we're happy to go through and share the highlights of it. It's pretty dense, so we won't cover everything, but we'll hit the highlights, and hopefully that will whet your appetite to actually go look at the whole document and make use of it. So if you go ahead to the next slide. The first piece of it is that we wanted to have what we call the guiding philosophy, and this stems from those community values that Avia talked about in that big picture structure of creating safety. We worked on putting together community values, and we pulled from them these ones that drive this whole set of procedures. So we support victims. If a complaint is lodged against someone, we take it seriously. Our aim is to be sympathetic and sincere, not severe, sincere, to the complainant, and to take action in a timely way, appropriate action. At the same time, we recognize that many situations have conflicting perspectives of what happened, and we recognize that there's a real possibility of false accusation, or more commonly, an accusation that's based on misperceptions. that something was perceived that wasn't intended, and it's about the miscommunication. And being falsely accused is another form of victimization. And so we felt very strongly about balancing those two perspectives. So our goal is to model best practices for resolving disputes in a positive and constructive manner. So that whole statement is in that document, front and center, top of the page, and it guides the whole rest of the document. So next slide, please. We had a lot of challenges as we were discussing the language that, that we wanted to have, but in our effort to balance those two perspectives, we decided to approach it by addressing those two sides specifically. So there's a whole piece in our document about the complainant's experience. When somebody lodges a complaint, what do they experience? And so that includes training the board or the volunteers, whoever is going to be the one receiving that complaint, how to be a good listener, how to give appropriate sympathetic responses. We want to reiterate to that person our values. We support you. We take this seriously. Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry this happened to you at our dance. We work really hard to make this a safe space, so thank you for telling us. And here's what's going to happen. It's not just that I'm writing this down and saying, you know, thank you, pat on the head, goodbye. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to take action within the next 30 days. We're going to document what you've told us. We're going to take your information to the person who you are naming in this complaint, and we're going to ask them for their response and their perspective, and we're going to evaluate all of the information we have, and then we have some guidelines to determine what happens based on all that information that we have. But so there's a summary that we provide to them that they can take home that outlines the whole process and tells them who they can contact for an update on how's it going. It's, you know, I don't want to say my case, you know, we're not lawyers, but if there were an analogy, how is the complaint progressing? So we want them to have that information so that they really feel that they were heard, that they were respected, and that something is going to happen in response. So that's our aim for what the complainant experiences when they lodge a complaint. So then we had another challenge. Once we get the complaint, there's this great breadth of what the complaint might be. It ranges from very minor offenses, which we think of as in that category of dance etiquette that falls along those etiquette guidelines. Somebody's swinging too hard, you know, they've got bad breath, whatever, all the way up to severe issues like stalking and bullying and harassment and actual assault and things like that. So our strategy to address that was to define 3 specific levels, low, medium, and high, with an escalation of response, where low-level complaints probably just need a little bit of education and raising awareness. That moves into a series of warnings, and only for severe infractions and severe problems would there be a suspension or a ban. Okay, next slide. Trying to motor along here to stay in my time frame. Next slide. Another challenge then that we had is that the people who are working the dance, the volunteers, you know, they signed up to help run a dance. They didn't sign up to do conflict resolution. And so we realized that not everybody has the skills to manage a complaint. And so our strategy for that had a couple of points. One was to make the intake process as simple as possible. We created a form that the volunteer at the dance can just follow along and fill out. It helps them ask the right questions to the complainant to make sure they get all the right information. And then they don't have to deal with it themselves. They can then send it up a chain of command. So for low-level issues, we want to have at the dance volunteers who have been trained to give feedback to somebody who's named. You know, if a low-level complaint is made, we have to say, well, who is it who's doing that to you? They might not even know that person's name. It's, you know, the woman in the blue dress, the guy in the red t-shirt. And then that volunteer has the skills to go approach that person and give them some feedback in an appropriate way. And Marcia is going to talk specifically about the techniques for doing that, so I'm not going to go there right now. At a higher level, if it's a more severe complaint, we don't want to deal with that at the dance. We don't want to blind somebody by like pulling them out to the principal's office. We want to contact them outside the dance and say, hey, a problem has come up. We'd really like to meet with you and talk with you. We set a date to do that. And that way they know going in that this is going to be a serious conversation and they don't feel blindsided by it. And then again, we follow appropriate techniques for giving feedback and asking for their response and hearing their side of the story. And Marcia's going to talk a little bit more about that. But that's the general idea for that. Okay, next slide. Another challenge.
We're just about, Diane, we're just about out of time, so
Okay,
I don't know if we'll be able to get through like 1 or 2 more minutes.
Yep, I'll go super fast. I've kind of already touched on the experience of the person named, being that we want them to have the chance to respond in full and to give their side of the story. And we felt really, strongly about due process. And if you go and look at our document, there's a lot of points in there for how we ensure due process for the person named in the response. So I'll leave it at that and we can move on. I wanted to touch on the 2 more points and I'll just show them to everybody so that they know to go look. The last one was dealing with issues that occur outside the dance. And this is a big one because it actually happens quite frequently, that these are the high-level complaints often are things that don't happen at a dance, but you met somebody at a dance, you started interacting with them outside the dance, and then things started going sour. And so often there might be a disgruntled ex, a relationship gone bad, and there are feelings of victimization that have happened outside, but they impact the dance because both of the people are dancers. And then we get into, this is a bad person, this is a predator, they should be banned, I'm boycotting the dance if they're allowed to come, and the board is kind of caught in the middle. And so we had a lot of talk about that, and we created a set of strategies, and I won't go into them because I don't have a lot of time, but I wanted to bring that up, that we've got them in there. So I encourage people to go look at this document if that's a problem for your community too, because I think we've spent some good time thinking about it and we've got some good suggestions in there for you. So I'll just leave it at that. And the slides are available and will be available after the web chat, and folks can contact us as well. So.
Yes, great, Diane. Yes, we will be posting all the slides on the CDSS website within the next 24 hours, and I'll be sending a link to all participants so you can access this. Is there one more slide that you have?
I think that's it, just the resources that people can go to if they want to find our documents.
Okay, great. So there's much more also on the Old Farmers Ball website. Okay, I do want to remind everybody that you can be typing in questions in the chat bar anytime you have anything occurs to you as you're listening to the guests. So next up we have Angela DeCarlis, who is, are you joining us from the Boston area tonight?
I am, Greater Boston. I'm in Somerville right now.
You want to just say a bit about the dances you're involved with?
Sure thing. So hi, I'm Angela. I use they, them, or she, her pronouns. Either are fine with me. I first was on the PatMad board in the Philadelphia area, and then later was on the BIDA board, the Boston Intergenerational Dance Advocates, for a number of years. I'm representing BIDA tonight, even though I'm no longer on the board, because I was one of the founding members of BIDA's safety team when we created the safety team about 2 years ago. And I'll be moving to Gainesville at the end of the month. I saw some gods sitting in the audience. So, hey, friends, I'll be down there soon. Great. We can go to the slides here. Next slide.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're having a little technical
we're having a technical problem here. I can't. For some reason, I'm not going to sign
I can add a wee bit here.
Okay, hang on a sec. There we go.
There
we go. There we go. Can you see that, Angela?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Thanks, tech support. So here are just some easy to remember URLs for BIDA's resources. You can go to bidadance.org, being our core website, /safety@BIDA, as seen there, is where you can find our safety resources, and there are more things to click through there. And blog.bidadance.org is a great place to look if you're interested in any of the things we do at BIDA. We survey our community extensively whenever we make big community changes, and one of our board members tends to blog about those things extensively. Jeff Kaufman often runs the BIDA blog and also runs a personal blog that has a lot of great information for dance organizers. So as far as our safety team operates, and a lot of it is very similar to what the Old Farmers Ball is doing, but there are a couple differences that I can touch on super briefly. We have a core safety team that's comprised of 3 to 4 members, some of which are BIDA board members, but not all of those folks are BIDA board members. And that core safety team is responsible for deliberating over issues and determining how to resolve them. We also have a fleet of safety representatives, safety reps, and we treat safety reps, those volunteers, as any other volunteer that one might make sure that slot is filled for your dance. So when organizers are making their dance happen, okay, we need 3 people to sit at the door and we need 1 person to run sound. And for BIDA, we also say, and we need 2 safety reps every night. We make sure to have 2 safety reps. We also do our best to make sure that those 2 representatives are of different gender presentations to help folks feel more comfortable to come to those people to report. Great, next slide. Thank you. So I wanted to talk a little bit tonight about what makes a dance space safe, right? And there are a ton of things that go into that. Before I sort of delve into what's on this slide, I also wanted to talk about setting expectations via your code of conduct, as Avia was speaking about earlier. We found in our 2 years of running BIDA's safety team that the issues that took the most time, that were brought to us with surprising frequency, were the kinds of issues that Diane mentioned earlier, issues that were incredibly challenging and complex and also incredibly personal, issues that generally happened outside of the dance floor. Unlike Old Farmer Ball's perfectly valid response to say we're not going to deal with those issues, at BIDA, we've done our best to make sure that we can provide a safe space for all of our community members. And often that means if we have 2 people who have had a challenging thing happen outside of the dance, such that we don't think that either person is a danger to the community independently, but we want to make sure that they both have a safe experience at our dance without needing to interact with one another. We usually have ended up proposing a split between dances where person A can come to half of our dances and person B can come to the opposite half of those dances. That's something that we've implemented a couple times, but it's maybe not something that we have clearly communicated as an expectation of our members. And that's one of the mistakes that we ran into. And one of our little growing pains that I hope others can learn from is, you know, if you want to go down that route, make sure it's clearly communicated to your dancers that just because someone filed a complaint first doesn't mean that necessarily we're going to ban the person they're complaining about outright, right? We're arriving at conclusions as a dance board and trying to take into consideration everyone's community members. I want to speak about creating a safe dance space, both in the hall and outside of the hall, specifically in terms of your online presence, right? A lot of dances now have a Facebook page, right? It's becoming increasingly common that a contra dance has their own personal Facebook page. What's not becoming super common is that if a community member is behaving hostilely online, it doesn't seem that those people often face any repercussions within their dance community. So I want to sort of plug that in organizers' minds. How do you deal with people who are behaving hostilely online, but when you get to the dance, they're super cheery and helpful and they're a fine dancer and they put away the chairs, right? It shouldn't be acceptable that someone can behave hostilely in a dance space, regardless of whether that space is virtual or not. I also want to speak to being welcoming of individuals of diversity. And what I mean when I say individuals of diversity, I'm casting an incredibly wide net, whether that means people of color, whether that means people who are gender non-binary, whether people who are transgender. The list goes on quite extensively. Notice community members who change their behavior when someone comes down the line to dance with them and they behave differently, right? So whether that means you have a dancer who behaves differently when they're swinging a young woman, for example, or if you have a dancer who behaves differently when they're swinging someone who's the same gender as them. those are things to look out for. They're microaggressions, but they make a difference and they make your community less welcoming and less safe. So just something to keep an eye out there. I think we can go to the next slide. So my apologies if I ruffle any feathers on this one, but I would like to personally plug my personal experience with gender-free dancing and a gender-free community and how it relates specifically to dance safety. I want to note that this is all anecdotal. I'm not saying that this is going to be the right move for any one community in particular, like what Avia was saying about building blocks and which ones are right for your community might not be right for what was right for BIDA. So 2 years ago, around the same time that BIDA had its safety team founded, we went gender-free. There's tons of information on our blog about specifically how we did that. I want to talk about how gender-free dancing is not only, you know, as is sort of obvious about it, right? It's more inclusive for gender nonconforming individuals or for individuals who like to experiment with that sort of thing. That's sort of the obvious thing that's talked about a lot. But I want to talk about how it's safer for everyone. My experience with gender-free dancing has shown me time and time again that because fewer assumptions are made about the people you're interacting with, you know, if I go up to someone and ask them to dance, for example, I don't assume that they want to dance in the gents role if I'm asking a male presenting person. So that's one assumption that I already am not making. I found that it creates this culture of no one's making assumptions. No one makes assumptions that your body is good at twirling. No one makes assumptions that you want to dip. No one makes assumptions that you want to dance in a certain way or anything like that. And because of that, people are asking more questions. People are communicating more with each other. People are making eye contact with each other saying, oh, would you like to do this? How does this feel for you? And that creates an incredibly more safe community, I think. I also have found that dancers tend to handle mistakes with more grace. So if you have a pair of newcomers coming down the line, there's no longer a need to sort of move them to where they need to be. If there's someone there that dancers are ready to dance with, an assumption isn't made that that person is wrong. An assumption is made that they're here having a good time and you go for it. So let's see. I think that, yeah, fewer instances of unsafe dancing generally. There are some great videos online. I posted one to the organizers of Contra Dance Facebook page not too long ago of a gender-free dance at BIDA. And I listed many examples of you can just see people having a safer and kinder time. Next slide. Oh, and you can create this kind of dynamic without having gender-free dancing. I just find that having the assumptions of gender removed from the community helps to create a culture of fewer assumptions generally. So more welcoming.
Angela, we have about a couple more minutes, so if you could
this is my
wrap it up.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, more welcoming is more safe. So how do you create that culture? How do you make it incredibly obvious that you're, as organizers, happy to listen and take complaints as necessary, but also just like create this precedent within your community that we are being welcoming here. So I included some photo examples. The top left photo of dance signs, which you can see more extensively online if you search for BIDA signs, are from BIDA. And you can see the top sign there says, you don't have to dance with anyone you don't want to. There's other dances that, or other signs that say things like, you know, say smile when you're dancing, or I don't know them off the top of my head at this moment, but we have those at our dance all the time. They create this welcoming atmosphere. The Portland In-Town Contra Dance in Portland, Maine, which is run by Dugan and Della Murphy, has done an extraordinary job with creating safety and a safe environment and culture. And some of the ways they do that are these name tag buttons, which you can see in the lower left. That's Dugan's name tag, and you can see that they intentionally left a space for pronouns at the bottom of the name tag. And that's the sort of thing that maybe it's not important for you, but if someone who's non-binary comes into your dance and sees that you've considered them, that makes them feel more welcome. It makes them feel more safe. And it also communicates to people who are uncomfortable, perhaps, with folks who are of non-binary gender, for example, hey, we're making room for these people. We're making a space where these people are safe. So if you're not cool with that, we need to have a conversation with you, right? So that you don't create an unsafe environment for other members of our community. The smaller buttons over on the right are also from PICD, and they're small hot pink buttons, and they say, "I'm learning, treat me sweetly." And I think the first time I saw those buttons, I squealed because they're just so phenomenal. They create this atmosphere of mistakes happen and to be kind about them. And as a caller, they're also super useful because you can see very easily where the new dancers are from the stage, which is pretty wonderful. So they're logistically useful, and they're also a wonderful tool for setting a safe and kind precedent in your community. Always remember to recognize and listen to the perspectives of historically disenfranchised demographics, whether it's young women, whether it's Black or Indigenous people of color, whether it's LGBTQIA individuals, whether it's gender nonconforming individuals. Those people have formulated their opinions from a lifetime of being marginalized, and none of us who are cis, white, straight, whatever, can know what that's like. So be patient with yourselves, be patient with each other, be kind and respectful. And thank you so much to everybody who's tuned in tonight. I'm really proud of you all for caring about dance safety. This is awesome. Yay, go team.
We have one more quick slide from you, Angela.
Do you?
No, I'm sorry. I thought there were resources. Okay. I'm sorry. I got confused. So thank you so much, Angela.
Absolutely. Thanks for having this.
And now we have Marcia Davis-Cannon from Mountain View, California. Marcia?
Hi. Well, one of the challenging pieces of keeping dance safe is...
Marcia, we're having trouble hearing you. Can you move closer? There you go.
One of the most challenging pieces of keeping a dance safe is actually having those uncomfortable conversations when something does go wrong. And a lot of people have actually studied this, and so there's some really good science on what can make feedback useful and helpful. And so I wanted to share some of that today. And I just want to give a shout out to Angela in that one of the beauties of a gender-free dance is that you have to ask for feedback, and just starting with, do you want to be on the left or on the right? And that can really help open the door to giving feedback. I've been surprised how many people tell me things that have happened to them, and I say, did you give any feedback? And the first response I remember getting was, I could do that. I could actually say that that hand below my waist didn't feel good to me, and I didn't want it there. And so one of the things we really want to do is make feedback easier, make it more open and acceptable to give feedback immediately when something goes wrong, and make it safe for people to speak that. So some of the research I want to share, there's a professor named Carol Robin at Stanford who's done a lot of research on how to give feedback in a way that it can be received. Can we go to the next slide? The definition of feedback really is information sent about prior behavior so that future behavior can be adapted to get the desired results. And that makes many of us squirm inside trying to give feedback. And so here are some guidelines that sort of make it work better, allow us to give feedback in a way that it can be received and heard. Can you go 2 slides ahead now to the next? If we can imagine that we're on one side of a net, like a tennis net, and the other person is on the other side of that net. So one person has done something that we need to go to feedback. Thank you. And you go to the next one as well. We want to give feedback on something. So it's very important that we stay on our side of the net. And what that means is that, can you do the next slide, please? We have seen, heard some behavior or a report of some behavior. What we don't have, and we've responded to that in some way, and it's the best way to give feedback is to talk about what we saw, the facts of what we saw, what we heard, and what we can go back to the last one previous. What we saw, what we heard, and how it made us feel, and what we want changed. The problem is when we jump the net and try to ascribe what the motives or intentions of the other person were. So if we try to assume that somebody is a pervert or somebody who's trying to make us feel bad or somebody who's trying to do something, that's ascribing a motive or an intention that we don't really know. And that's usually when we get in trouble trying to give feedback. So if we stay on our side of the net and communicate what we saw, what we heard, how we felt about it, and what we would like to see changed in great clarity, we will probably have more comfort and better results in that conversation. There's a document that I've put together that'll be available at the end, and it includes things like how to treat somebody who shows up drunk, or how to treat someone who actually has a mental illness. We've had a couple issues with both of those at our dances in the Bay Area. There are also several articles on how to have an uncomfortable conversation, and some articles on the work that Carol Robin has done on setting a safe space and staying with the kind of information that is useful to communicate as opposed to crossing that net. I'll stop there.
Did you have a comment about the next slide? I'm curious.
About this one?
Yes.
The alligator one?
Yes.
You know, bring that back up. Simply that anyone can get put on the defensive when they receive feedback, and they can feel like that frog in the mouth of the alligator. And so it's our job to really do as much as we can to make that a calm conversation. It shouldn't be heated and from a triggered place. It should be calm and a recitation of facts and the consequences of those facts.
Okay. We have one more slide from Marcia. Oh. Any comment?
And that's it. We really want to encourage feedback as early as possible in the process. And one thing I really try to do is model giving feedback. If somebody's hand is too far across my shoulder and so we end up a little too close face to face, I'll say, you know, I'd really rather your hand was over here. And they'll say, oh, okay. And it's giving feedback in a way that's, you know, hey, this is what I prefer. And I think we need to model and empower people to give feedback as quickly and non-judgmentally as they can, in order to avert as many situations as possible.
Great. And one more slide has resources and articles. So again, this will be posted on the CDSS website. You'll have more time to delve into these links. Okay. Thank you all for much wonderful information and thought-provoking ideas. We're moving into the Q&A section now. If any of you have other questions you haven't typed into the chat bar, go right ahead, and we'll be choosing some as much as we have time for. And so guests, once you've heard a question, any of you that want to respond, just let us know and chime in.
Okay, I will start this. Let's see. Okay, so just to reiterate what Linda was just saying, all of these things, I know the slides went kind of quickly, but there will be, everything is available. And also there's longer, in the version that's going to be posted online, it includes some of the slides that were not, that had to be cut for time, but a lot of the presentations are actually longer, so you'll get a lot more detail in those. I just wanted, somebody had asked about that. Yep. And there is a question here from, yes, I see it, Linda, thank you. So the slide was gone, this is from Kay Urquhart. The slide was gone quickly, but I foresee potential trouble if a serious infraction occurs at a dance and the person named is not confronted until after the dance, not only for the safety of other dancers, but for the victim to feel supported by their committee. Can you explain this process a bit more in depth?
Sure.
This might be for
I think
Diane.
that's aimed towards ours with the complaint procedures. So we just didn't have time to go into all the details of the procedures that we developed, but there's a lot of detail in the document that outlines, it's kind of a flow chart of what you do based on the situation at hand. So a big part of it for a higher level complaint, a higher level issue, is immediate evaluation of the danger in the moment. And so if there's a dangerous situation in the moment at hand, the board reserves the right to ask anybody to leave the dance at any time. And we will do that. And that's the point. I think that we have the same plan that Angela talked about having volunteers present who are trained and have the skills and feel comfortable addressing issues. And those might not be the same individuals as the people who are sitting at the door taking money and giving information. So that's an important piece. So if somebody needs to be removed from the dance, they will be. Our policy is to offer them a refund of their admission price, just so that there's not any issue of, I paid my $6 and then you kicked me out, whatever, take your $6 and go. We try to get their contact info so that we can contact them afterwards to follow up and try to resolve the issue. We try, if they'll take it, if they're in a frame of mind where we can have a conversation with them, we want to offer them the summary of our complaint procedures, the same way that we offer it to the complainant, so that the person who's named as the problem will know what our procedures are and what's going to happen as follow-up. Our aim is to be very transparent about the whole process and to follow our procedures, the way that they're supposed to be. But what we don't want to do is get into some kind of an argument of, well, this person is saying that you did this, that, and the other, and then they come back and might be volatile and might be denying it and might attack them in response. It's not something that, and meanwhile there's a whole dance going on and it's a public environment. It's a more controlled situation if we can have that deeper conversation when everybody has a heads up. And so that's kind of what our approach is. And Angela has something to add.
Yeah, I just want to quickly say that, and every community is different, but in the 2 years that BIDA Safety has been operating, the most common kinds of complaints that have taken the most sort of energy and time to deal with have been very small things that are very much not urgent, like, hey, can you talk to this person about being kinder about timing, sort of small things, or much larger things that take a lot of back and forth over email, but that don't have like immediate, we have to deal with this at the dance right now kind of urgency. I think that those situations are somewhat uncommon, and it's something worth being concerned about, but in my experience, it hasn't been excessively common. Maybe that's different for other communities.
Thank you, Angela. And also thank you, Diane, for your comments there. I want to move on to a question from Emily, who's in Ottawa, and she says that in her dance, they use some of the tools that Avia was talking about earlier. But what she's finding as an organizer is that dealing with the complaints can get quite exhausting for the board. They take a lot of time to talk about about these things thoughtfully, but the process takes time and a lot of energy. When there's so much else to look after as an organizer, this can feel like it pulls our team down sometimes. Thoughts on dealing with this?
This is exactly why BIDA has a safety team that is separate from the board. It's not always possible. Your community might not have enough people who are able to put in that kind of time such that you can have, in addition to your board, a whole other set of team members. But honestly, it's the only way it was able to happen for us. The amount of attention that safety concerns need is intense, and the issues can be incredibly challenging emotionally for the people who are volunteering in that capacity. Luckily, dance communities tend to be diverse in terms of where people are coming from in terms of professional experience. I know at BIDA, we've done our best to sort of look out for community members who are already trained in various capacities to make them especially good, who already have these skill sets developed due to their professional work or just life experience, whatever. But I think that even if there's some overlap, even if you have a safety team that has 3 people on it and 2 of them are also board members, you need to have at least one person on your safety team who's a member of your dance community, who has time, that isn't going to your board meetings and isn't dealing with like your bylaw changes or your air conditioning unit that broke or whatever, you know, like on top of the safety stuff.
Great, great. This comes from Bob Peters. He says, how much should we expect of the caller? How is the caller needed in creating safety? Does anybody want to take that?
Got a couple good candidates for this
I'll
one.
take a stab at it since I am a caller. I guess I generally take the approach, if I'm wearing my caller hat, that when I'm a guest in somebody else's community, I take my guidance from the people who hired me. So I'm really looking to the organizers to find out what their norms are in their community. And if they specifically ask me to make particular announcements from the mic, then I'm happy to do that. But I tend to be cautious about proselytizing when I'm in somebody else's community. When I'm calling in my own home community, I feel a little bit more empowered to do that. But that could also be because I wear multiple hats as an organizer and also as a caller. And when we have callers, guest callers in our community, and I'm wearing the organizer hat, I feel that it's pretty important to communicate to them what our norms are and what we hope that they will do from the mic.
Yeah.
Avia, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so I'm just speaking from past experience as a Brooklyn Contra organizer, that one of the things that we put in our structure of documents was what gets communicated to the caller and what we request of them. And that developed over time as we worked on the materials. So, you know, some of that goes out in the beginner's lesson. I see a question in here about how do you encourage people to report? And, you know, some that gets comes up right away, especially as you have new people in the door, you make them comfortable. All of the tools that Angela talked about with making people feel welcome. The more welcome people feel, the more comfortable they will feel with telling you if something goes wrong. And we always got our callers to help us transmit that message. So I think that like the caller can do a lot, but as Diane said, the organizer needs to empower them.
Yeah.
Terrific.
Robert?
The caller isn't always the person that's doing instruction before the dance actually begins, but sometimes they are. And it's important for new dancers to learn the language and some of the other moves, but it's equally important to point out that there is a safety feature at the dance. If you have problems, talk to someone to let them know that there's resources available if they have any issues they don't understand. Make that something that happens early on in the process when you're teaching them the new dances.
Terrific. Thank you. A question here, how do you encourage people to report in the first place?
Well, I started in on that, but I would say pick up on that and say that the development of the sort of proactive how you want your dance to welcome people and what materials you put into place to get that message across, whether it's the courtesy and etiquette guidelines or the values of your dance or the buttons with the pronouns on them that Angela said, or the treat me sweetly buttons, I'm a beginner, which are, they're truly amazing. I almost want to wear them even though I'm not a beginner.
I know.
So sweet.
Makes me so happy. I want to wear one just in my life.
Yeah. The signage at your dance, all of that goes a long way towards making people feel like they can report, and also encouraging, you know, when announcements are made, whether if they're by the caller or the organizer, to point out who the organizers are at your dance and who the safety team is that night, and just, you know, get them to raise their hands. It's always nice to do a shout out to your organizers anyway. But that's a moment where you say, hey, we're around, maybe we're wearing special buttons, but at least identify yourself. If there's anything you need to talk to us about, you know, we are here for that purpose. We're here to make this dance enjoyable and safe for you. And if you don't announce it, they can't know that they can come to you. So that's a huge step in the right direction.
It can also be really useful to just keep an eye out for the new people and look at their expressions at the end of the dance.
Yes.
Especially if they're dancing with someone you know has been accused of something in the past, and just ask them if they were okay with that.
Absolutely. And I actually see that coming in the comments here as well. But as a dance organizer, I did that very thing. I would watch all the newcomers and the returnees, and I would talk to them at the break, at the beginning of the dance, at the end of the dance, and make sure that they knew that I was accessible to them for all of their experiences, not just the positive ones.
I would just want to chime in here that there's a lot of very interrelated ideas that we're covering here. And I personally feel strongly that what we're talking about is a cultural shift, a change in norms. And that happens over time. And I think that we need to be a little bit patient in allowing things, you know, to happen. We're being as proactive as we can, but also recognize it's going to take a little bit of time. But it generally happens through modeling and, you know, the establishing. It's that whole live the change that you want to be. That I think that, you know, for us, as we develop this shiny new set of complaint procedures, we tell beginners about it in the beginner lesson. We make announcements at the dance, after the second dance, and also right before the break, whatever the timing is. We have a flyer on the flyer table that says, hey, we have complaint procedures. Here's the general idea. If anything goes wrong, here's what you do. So multiple media for how to get the word out. But also the first time or two that it actually happens, when somebody lodges a complaint and the procedure gets used, and it works well and they have a good experience, people talk to their friends. And as the buzz gets going that says, hey, they tell their friends, I had a problem and I actually complained about it and they did something and here's how it worked. That's going to start to snowball, at least we hope, and create a culture of reporting, not only reporting to the board, but as Marcia talked about, creating this culture of giving feedback in the moment, nipping things in the bud. We need to facilitate this whole cultural shift to the kind of community we want to be.
Yeah, and I just would add in that I think that, you know, what we talked about, everybody is talking here about the do's as well as the don'ts, and how the do's are in many ways the most proactive way to deal with don'ts. So by modeling the behavior that we want to see and encouraging, you know, like reporting might be as easy as, or we're modeling the idea of like, oh, could you shift your hand to my, you know, to my shoulder, or hey, I'm uncomfortable with it there, or this hurts me. By modeling feedback, we're creating the culture, or this culture shift. So make sure when you're developing these documents, don't always start with the don'ts. There, I started with the don'ts. Start with the do's, and they will create that culture shift.
Okay, we have thank you, Avia. We have a question here. What are your thoughts about a place where people can leave anonymous reports? Angela?
So BIDA has a Google form. We are a relatively young and tech savvy. We're in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and like half of our dancers are MIT affiliates. So we have a Google form. If that happens to work with your community's demographic, I highly recommend it. We do have an opportunity for feedback to be anonymous. That said, there's only so much you can do about some kinds of anonymous feedback, right? So that doesn't mean that you shouldn't discourage anonymous feedback. So in a different community, as an example, I put in some feedback that was relatively minor, and it didn't matter that it was me, it could have been anonymous feedback. And those organizers said, oh, you're the third person to give us a small piece of information about one individual, right? So encourage small bits of feedback, encourage small complaints, encourage anonymous feedback, and have an option for it, but also make it very clear when you draft that form. And I think BIDA's form is probably findable and searchable on BIDA's website, bidadance.org. Make it clear when you draft that form, like, feel free to submit this anonymously, but in certain circumstances, we may need to, we may not be able to do anything with this complaint other than just sort of store it and until someone makes a similar complaint anonymously. So, yeah, that's what we have.
Thank you. I just want to mention, Will Loving has been very active in the chat here, and we won't have time to go through all of, he's offered a lot of good suggestions. The chat will be available with all the whole transcript of the chat will be available online. But I just wanted to say one of the things that he mentioned was that establishing policies for newer dancers is easier, he thinks, than for dance organizations that have been around for decades and have tolerated some behavior. It's easier for newer dances than it is for older dances. So, I think that's a good point. And it's that there may be something that you've experienced too, but I think he's got a good point there. And also, let's see,
I would just say that it is never the wrong time to create culture change. So I totally agree with Will that it can be much more challenging, but that doesn't mean that it's not the right time to do it.
Never forget that the full of change, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And he also,
now is always the right time. This is very true. It can also be like a way, if you are dealing with a dance that is going through that or is struggling to create change, be explicit about it. Be explicit. Say, we want to create change, and you will find people, people will resist you, but other people will come on board with you and help you create that change.
Yeah.
I think it's also important to be clear, as Will was talking about, for dances that have been established for a long time, you may very well have the situation of behavior that has seemingly been accepted for many, many years because we've had a long time culture of not giving feedback and not lodging complaints, of just gritting our teeth and bearing it. And so we're in a moment of change, and that's difficult. And so you may very well have the situation come up where someone says, you know what, I've always done this. It's never been a problem before. People love the way I dance. I always get good feedback. And how do you deal with that? And one answer is, well, it's possible that for a long time people haven't been giving you truthful feedback, but now they are. Or if you've been doing this all these years, I'm sorry to have to tell you, but it's actually never been acceptable. It's just that nobody's wanted to tell you before. But I'm going to do you the favor of telling you now. And I know it's hard to hear, et cetera, et cetera. And Marcia has more to offer along the specific script of what you say. But I think that we need to acknowledge that those feelings are going to be there, that this is a like, why all of a sudden is it what I've been doing for so long suddenly not okay? And we need to have a good answer for that.
And I think sometimes, being personal, so say, like, I understand that people have, enjoyed dancing with you in the past, but this is not something that I'm personally okay with. Because that adds up, and it creates a start for that feedback to come across.
Okay, great. We have about 1 minute more. Do any of our guests have any parting comments that you want to pass along before we wrap things up? Yes, Angela.
I just want to say that I would be very happy to be available to continue this conversation offline with anybody listening who would like to speak about safety and gender-free dancing. I am moving to the Gainesville community, so those of you God's dancers listening can just wait. I'll be there in a second. But if anybody wants to hit me up, I'm on Facebook, or you can email me through my website, which is just angela.decarlis.com.
Ditto.
So The contact information for 3 of the guests are included in the web chat slides, which you'll be able to access on the CDSS website. Was there one more peep out of somebody?
Just be brave, and thank you for doing this work, because it needs to happen. And by being on this web chat, you're all part of making a culture shift.
You make
So,
the web chat,
Thank you
the
for
chat
thank
go
you for
away.
everyone.
Thanks for watching.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Okay, well, we'll wrap it up by letting you know about more resources that are available for organizers through CDSS. We have a wonderful organizers resource portal that Emily Addison from Ottawa, Ontario, has been working on for over a year, I think. And when you go to the portal, you can find a list of many topics that are pertinent for organizers and delve into almost endless resources on the different topics. And in the portal, you can access a section on the web chat series where you can see recordings. By tomorrow, the recording for this web chat and the 4 others that we have done previously. We also have community outreach grants with deadlines 3 times a year. The next one is October 1st. And another hat that I wear is the grants coordinator. So if you have any questions about that, feel free to contact me. Emily Addison is also the editor for a quarterly e-blast called Shop Talk for organizers. And you can go to the portal homepage and find a way to join Shop Talk. We also have quarterly e-blast for our CDSS affiliates, and those often include information and resources for organizers. And to join as a CDSS member, you can find information on our website. Also, we have quarterly newsletters that come out and often include articles for organizers. There's a great article by Jeff Kaufman from BIDA called Taking Someone Aside that's in the summer CDSS news.
And
Highly recommend it.
That is posted on the website. If you go to the news page, you'll find it there.
And also, we have week-long music and dance camps that are literally starting in a couple of days. Those happen in 4 different communities around the country, and you can find lots of information on our website. And scholarships are still available, and I wear the hat of giving out the scholarships as well. So it's not too late to apply. What were you going to say, Angela?
Thank you.
Okay, so one more slide. So for wrapping things up, we would love to have feedback from all of you who have participated in this web chat. We take your feedback very seriously, and it helps us a lot with improvements to future web chats. You also have a chance to suggest topics for other web chats in the future. So look in your email tomorrow, and you'll be receiving a questionnaire from me. And the message I send will also include a link to this web chat recording, and we'll be posting other safety-related resources that have been mentioned by our guests tonight. And I'm sure some of you have questions that were not answered, and one way to continue these conversations is to join Shared Wait, an online forum for organizers. You can keep on exchanging ideas about lots of topics. We have another web chat coming up in October. This will be the first one we've ever done for people who organize singing events. So this one is called Connecting Community Sing Organizers. And most of all, we want to appreciate you for joining us this evening and for all the work that you do. And we want to leave you with the message that CDSS is available to support you however we can. So if you're encountering an issue or a concern in your community and would like to chat about it, you can contact me, Linda Henry, at linda@cdss.org. Also, as Angela mentioned, she's available for specific questions you might have about safety. And we are mostly just very grateful for everyone who is involved with organizing dances and caring so much about making sure they are safe. So thank you all, and we hope you've gleaned some useful tools and ideas and inspiration from this web chat.
Thank you, everybody.
Big virtual hug to all of you. Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.
And record.